This is the story of a book. Not just any book, a book so dangerous, so divisive, it shook an entire empire to its core. Now, I'm not talking about a book of spells or a manifesto of war or even a religious tome. It was a dry political study written in relative obscurity, and yet it struck fear into the heart of an empire that prided itself as one of the most mighty on earth. Intrigued? You should be. The stage was the early 19th century, and the empire in question was none other than the British Empire. At its height, the British Empire covered about a quarter of the Earth's land surface and governed over 412 million people. It was said that the sun never set on the British Empire. But even the grandest empires can be shaken to their foundations by the most unexpected forces. Our story begins with an unassuming man named James Mill, a Scottish economist, philosopher, and historian. James Mill wasn't an aristocrat or a military general. He was a writer, a thinker, and in 1818, he published a book titled The History of British India. It sounds harmless, doesn't it? But this book, dear viewer, wasn't your average history lesson. In his book, Mill conducted a scathing critique of the British administration in India. He described the ongoing exploitation, the corruption, and the glaring injustices meted out to the Indian people under British rule. He insisted that colonial administrators had no understanding, and little interest in understanding, Indian cultures, religions, and traditions. Rather, they saw India as nothing more than a treasure chest waiting to be looted. But here's the kicker. James Mill had never stepped foot in India, not a single day of his life. His only source? Official records, travel journals, and letters. Yet Mill leveraged these resources to paint a picture so vivid, so embarrassing for Britain, that it became impossible to ignore. You might be thinking, why would anyone listen to a guy who never even visited the place he's writing about? A fair point. But Mill's work resonated because it put into words what many had suspected but hadn't dared to say out loud. His book wasn't just read by academics and historians, it became a sensation among political thinkers, reformers, and even the general British public. And here's where the plot thickens. Within a few years of its publication, The History of British India became required reading for employees of the East India Company, the very organization it criticized. Yes, you heard that right. The company ordered that incoming officers read Mill's damning account before they took up their roles in India. Why? To prepare them for the stark realities of governance. Or perhaps to indoctrinate them with Mill's perception of India as backward and in need of reform, justifying ongoing British intervention. Ironically, it was Mill's critical voice that also helped sustain British policies, albeit warped for imperial self-interest. But this wasn't just about policy shift. Mill's book ignited a wider conversation back in Britain. People started asking uncomfortable questions. Why are we there? Should we be there? It forced the British elite and ordinary citizens to confront the darker truths of colonialism. And it wasn't just the British asking these questions. Indian intellectuals and reformers began picking up Mill's book too. Think of this. A book written by a man who had never visited India inspired the Indian independence movement. Yes, indeed. Indian leaders, like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, began to use Mill's accusations as ammunition to push for reforms within the British administration or agitate for self-rule. In some ways, Mill became an unwitting ally of the very cause he might not have fully supported. Fast forward a few decades, and the debates Mill helped spark became fuel for activism, both in Britain and in India. The mid-19th century saw the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857, an event historians often mark as the beginning of the end for British rule in India. Had Mill not written his critical tome, who knows? Perhaps these revolutionary sparks would have taken much longer to ignite. And let me tell you, history has a sense of irony. Mill's son, John Stuart Mill, grew up to be one of the most prominent advocates for liberty and free speech of his time. John Stuart Mill also wrote extensively on colonialism, and while his opinions were sometimes contradictory, he couldn't escape the shadow of his father's work. The Mill family became synonymous with intellectual rebellion against institutional norms. But hold up, let's not romanticize James Mill entirely. His book wasn't without flaws. Critics accused him of overgeneralizations, of imposing a Western Enlightenment lens that ignored Indian voices. In fact, some say that while Mill critiqued British practices, he didn't exactly celebrate Indian culture either. However, the fact remains, his work lit a spark that would catch fire as Indians themselves took up the mantle of resistance. What can we learn from this today, you might ask? The story of James Mill and the history of British India is a testament to the power of words. Whether for good or ill, a book, crafted in a quiet study, far removed from the heat of colonial oppression, can inspire debates, change perceptions, and even alter the course of history. In an age where social media posts, tweets, and vlogs dominate the discourse, perhaps Mill's story is a reminder. The pen, or the keyboard for that matter, remains mightier than the sword. So the next time you find yourself in a library or scrolling through your e-reader, remember this: the power of a single book can shape empires, provoke revolutions, and even redefine the ways we see the world. And if a Scottish economist with no direct experience of India could influence millions, who's to say you can't do something similar? This is Chronicles of Human History, turning everyday stories from the past into epic adventures for the present. Hit subscribe, join the journey, and stay tuned for more. The past, as we've just seen, is often the key to understanding the future.